Warning, 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 warning. An electric disturbance has been detected.
I love that song. Set a course for the disturbance.
Plotting course towards the disturbance. The disturbance appears to be coming from a black hole straight ahead. Losing navigation capabilities.
When I think back on video games of my childhood, they are tied to particular memories in my life. Mario 64 reminds me of my childhood neighbor and how his family got the game on Christmas, and I remember watching him and his brother play next to their Christmas tree. When I think about Legend of Legaia, I think about my best friend in 4th grade and how he was on a mission to catch the biggest fish in the game and break the record, which was being reported on in some gaming magazine at the time. I remember bringing the instruction manual with me to school so I could flip through and draw the characters while in class. When I think about Wild Arms, I think about how I was probably too young to be playing that game and how the game was taken away from me when my dad walked in as "damn" was typed out as a character's dialogue in the dialogue box. When I think about Jak and Daxter, I remember middle school and how I would rush home to play the game for the 2 hours I was allotted to play on school nights. The list can go on and on. The point is that the games I remember are tied to other aspects of my childhood in ways that movies, books, and other mediums don't seem to have the same grasp on. And I ask myself, why is this? My guess is that it's the active nature of a game. The act of participating helps suture memories into my mind easier than a movie or book. I also play games for longer periods of time than I watch movies or read. I can play a game for a month or more and the memory lasts longer. I can't remember the first time I saw Space Jam, but I can remember the first time I played Lion King on Sega Genesis because I played that game for weeks. I've never taken a vacation and spent the entirety of it playing a game or watching a movie, but I did take a summer vacation for 1 week 2 years ago and spent some time playing Neon White, and now that vacation is logged in my mind as the Summer Neon White vacation. I also had a Resident Evil 5 and 6 Snow Week 3 years ago. For me, because of the active nature of games, times in my life where I played a particular game are now identifiable memories tied to certain periods of my life. They can transport me back like a black hole.
Hello. You've seemed to have lost your way through the white hole. Can you state your business, please?
Sorry, yeah, I heard a song that I remembered and I wanted to follow it.
A song, you say? The Siren's got another, it seems. Can you describe the song?
Yeah, it's the water level song from Donkey Kong Country.
I'm sorry. You're just talking gibberish to me. But if you want to return to your dimension, you are going to have to find the source of that song. There's a stack of old things that float in from your universe over there. Feel free to rummage through them.
I have fallen into another internet rabbit hole, which is game collecting. I watch a lot of gaming content on YouTube, and the algorithm one day recommended some game collectors, game room tours, tours of gaming stores, and I spent an hour or so watching these videos. Now, that's all YouTube recommends to me. And in one of these videos, the YouTuber explains that he's not just collecting games, he's trying to recapture his childhood. And I thought that was interesting for both good and bad reasons. My first thought was that it sounds a little sad, like a person with the bad Peter Pan syndrome. But another thought was, still, this looks fun. And then I thought, maybe I could do a little of this. My nostalgia for gaming primarily exists for the 90s and early 2000s with the first PlayStation, PlayStation 2, Nintendo 64, and Sega Genesis. Those are the systems that, from a retro perspective, are the most interesting to me, and these systems definitely make me think about my childhood. But would collecting these things be a waste of time? Time is a precious commodity. So much of my time is spent on survival, working to have money to buy food, pay for the roof over my head, planning for a rainy day. The remaining time needs to be split between time with family and friends, exercise, sleep, and fun. Fun has about a 2-hour window during the weekdays, so that's 10 hours of fun during the week. Do I really want to spend some of that time trying to collect old games? Well, so far the answer is sure, sometimes, because I'm finding that the hunt is fun. But then other times, I'd rather use some of that time doing something else. People who collect are preserving some piece of the past, attempting to be able to physically pick up a childhood memory. This can be seen in the faded markings on cartridges of a kid from the 90s, or the indentation in a case from someone opening and closing it so many times. It's the old save files and broken controllers. All of these things can be like relics of the past, a little piece of a time machine.
Ah yes, another weary traveller through the black hole, digging through the junk to find a way back. I remember a similar traveller. I believe they were searching for the Wild Arms instruction manual. I'll be honest, I stole that game from the pile and played it myself. I loved playing that game. I loved the art, the case, and the instruction manual. I heard of human children bringing the instruction manual with them to school to practice drawing the characters. I guess physical games gives these people something to bring with them into the real world. A question that is being brought up is physical media dying? It's hard to argue that it's thriving. With streaming services killing the DVD industry, and now digital libraries of video games killing the physical release, what can retro games offer in terms of space? Retro games not only let you hold and access the past, they also take up physical space on shelves, in game rooms, basements and stores. They offer a tangible experience, like an instruction manual, a box and cover art. They become baked into the decor of a game room, adding colour to otherwise soulless white walls, allowing for mini museums to exist in private homes across the world. They become trophies for those who have played and beaten these games to proudly mount for all to see. The physical release also protects the art from failing digital libraries and gives ownership back to the player. Video games and other forms of digital media exist as dreams captured in pixels of shadow and light and colour. The game aspect exists in some other fourth dimension. You cannot touch the characters you play as. You cannot feel the grass of a level or the sting of a hit. These experiences happen in a digital realm, and without the physical release, that's where they stay. But the CD, the cartridge, the card, allows for a limited real physical experience of owning and playing games.
When investigating the black hole of retro gaming and concepts such as trying to recapture a childhood memory, my results kept bringing up these nostalgia bait videos recommended to me on YouTube. The Donkey Kong country water level music would play over montages of pictures from the 90s and descriptions that read something along the lines of, "You will never experience this again," or "You'll never feel this safe again." When watching these, I expressed to Chunk Jack that remembering things from when he was a kid is great. But there's a time to be a kid, and there's a time to be an adult. And being an adult shouldn't be this thing that only causes anxiety. Millennials and Gen Z get a bad rap from older generations, but this isn't unique to them. Every generation deals with this in some form or fashion. In the 60s, boomers were called hippies, and the greatest generation scoffed at their political protests, calling them lazy while putting them down. It's hard for a generation to grow up and take the reins, and then it's hard to let go of the reins. And millennials and zoomers will probably do the same to the next generation. All that being said, it's fine to appreciate the past, a childhood, to dabble in collecting if you want. It's not hurting anyone. But you don't want to do this at the expense of adulthood. Being an adult is meaningful too, They shape society and make their mark, hoping to lay the groundwork for the next generation. They can finally get a turn at steering the ship in whatever capacity that means for the individual as well as society as a whole. Collecting games is fun, sure, but what about making games? Because as an adult, you can do that now.
Have you ever noticed that companies that are trying to create these self-driving cars may be copying the film Minority Report released in 2002? I have no evidence to support this other than the fact that some Tesla cars seem to have some design elements that remind me of the cars in Minority Report, and the fact that the cars in Minority Report are self-driving. And what about AR glasses and VR headsets today? Don't they seem a lot like how VR was depicted in Ready Player One? This got me thinking, who steers the ship guiding technological advances? Could it be artists? Artists dream of something, engineers see the artist's dream and they think, I might actually be able to make that. Maybe when we watch a popular movie based in the future, we should take note because it seems like investors, inventors, and engineers may be getting ideas from movies and other pieces of art. Look at what OpenAI is trying to create and then watch Her, for example. Art shapes the future, and so we ought to consider what depictions of the future we want to show, because people with the means to steer society are watching. Same may be true for video games. Perhaps we should focus more on depictions of a happy future, a society where we come together and solve some of the problems we face today. Maybe these positive depictions can steer those in power to do some good. Who can say? In my quest to start collecting games, some older games from the early 2000s piqued my interest. If I try to match the early 2000s in video games to a decade in Hollywood, I might say they resemble the late 80s and early 90s films in some ways. Not an actual artistic aesthetic, but in where video games as an industry and Hollywood films as an industry were at those times. By then, the video game industry had more than established itself as a medium of art and entertainment that was not going away. It survived a downturn in the industry after the first home consoles were released and Atari's E.T. bombed. Just like Hollywood in the 80s had come out of a tumultuous time in the 60s and 70s with box office flops. The early 2000s were also riding off the high of the Nintendo consoles, from the NES to Nintendo 64, and PlayStation 2 were knocking it out of the park. I mention this because a game I've decided to play is Metal Gear Solid 2, a game released in 2001 for PlayStation 2, a Kojima game published by Konami, a game that at its time of release caused fans of the series to be upset by sidelining its main protagonist for a new character, Raiden. In a game that today is looked back on and debated as to whether it is a worthy addition to a classic series. As I play the game in 2024, I find the game at times very difficult to play. Metal Gear Solid 2 is dated by today's standards. The controls are very clunky, the writing, well, it's Kojima, so I'm not sure it's purely an age thing.
You're right on time, I see. I like a punctual man. Is he Dead Cell? I am Fat Man.
And other aspects just reek of the early 2000s, in a way that can take me out of the experience. But then, right at the point of frustration, when I think maybe I should turn this off, I don't. So why don't I? I think because there's something here in this game, something I'm not seeing in very many modern games. I think it's part the top-down perspective, a mix of first-person and third-person perspectives, and these clunky controls that are close to tank controls. All these things are dated by today's standards, but still hold a certain charm. They can absolutely be frustrating, but the fixed top-down camera angles are also more cinematic. The flipping seamlessly between first and third person when it works actually feels pretty nice and interesting. To see a level from a top-down angle and then be in the level in an instant as the character is something I don't see in many modern AAA games. And the writing. There's something charming about goofy video game logic from the early 2000s. Like, In-game characters straight up explaining how the controls work without acknowledging that and telling Raiden to hit the action button or the select button to do something in-game.
Let me know when you're ready to turn in a save. The proprietary save frequency is 140.96.
Or having a bombs expert ride roller skates because I guess it's just fun. All these little charming things build up and make the experience unique compared to playing modern games. And I think that is why I keep playing, because I want to see where this goofy world takes me by the end of it. I might compare this experience to watching older films. Films from decades ago where jokes don't land as hard today, special effects are more parlor tricks than believable, and yet there's a charm to them. A time capsule to another era, and maybe even something to be learned about that period in which these games were made. Not talking about historical information found in the game, but sensibilities of the times they were made in. We can travel back and experience a vibe in the trends of another decade and gain new appreciation for times we live in today. When we think about previous decades, we can get a general sense of the decade's aesthetic. 90s were colorful, lots of jean jackets, CD Walkmans. 80s had hair metal, perms were trending, and the 2000s were edgy and full of leather and earth tones and baggy clothes. But what's harder to pinpoint are current trends. What will the 2020s be remembered for? And what will the 2020 games be remembered for? The 2020s will be kicked off with the COVID years. That will be studied in history books around the world, much like the Spanish flu of the 1920s is studied today. And that's going to kick off probably everything for this decade. In terms of gaming in the pandemic, we'll see that the gaming industry had insane growth over the COVID years, and then in 2023 and 2024, we'll see a bit of a reduction. Companies start shrinking and layoffs occur, and Animal Crossing New Horizons will be known as the COVID game. In 2020, we got Hades, Cyberpunk 2077, and Ghost of Tsushima. In 2022, we got Elden Ring. 2023 will be the year of Tears of the Kingdom and Baldur's Gate 3, and the God of War reboot fits somewhere in all of this. Looking at these notable games, it would seem so far that the 2020s could be known for the golden age of open-world games. We're still in the midst of the 2020s, but I think it's interesting trying to guess what this decade will be remembered for while we're still in it. We'll have to wait a few more years before we know for sure.